Back with another video. This time I'm going to talk about stretching. Now, why have I chosen to talk about stretching? Well, actually being asked about this quite a few times by people about what kind of stretching I would prescribe, especially with people talking about tight lower backs, tight hamstrings, tight shoulders, and I really just wanted to address this. Now, a lot of the people who are asking me about this don't necessarily engage in a lot of strength training, they do just ride their bike. So I did go away and do a little bit of research just to clear up my ideas, and I just want to summarise some of that for you now. So, first of all, stretching, we should probably talk about two different kind of modalities for stretching. Static stretching, which is where you would find that stretch position, hold that stretch for 15 seconds, maybe up to a minute, and the goal of that is to cause sort of long-term changes in the length of the tissue. More on that later. And then dynamic stretching, which is where you're moving quickly in and out of a stretch, such as swinging your legs back and forth, swinging the arms up and down or something like that. That's dynamic stretching. Okay, so stretching versus strength training. So there's been a pretty significant meta-analysis done, in fact a couple of them done in the last few years. Meta-analysis, just to be clear, a study of studies, so where they've rounded up all the available research and then looked at effect sizes so they can make a sort of more general statement about the relationship between stretching, strength training and flexibility. What did they find? So they found that actually strength training or stretching both had similar effects on flexibility. Okay, now there are lots of things that could influence that. Is the strength training done with proper technique through a full range of motion, and also is the stretching done with proper technique as well. But generally found out that similar effects on flexibility. This kind of goes against what the general feeling about strength training is that it kind of makes you muscle bound and less mobile, but actually when we look at high-end athletes, they exhibit pretty exceptional athleticism, and that includes flexibility and mobility. Okay, so strength training obviously makes you stronger, so why would you ever choose to stretch if the effect size is similar? Well, fortunately we don't have to choose just stretching or just strength training. We can incorporate both things into our fitness. Strength training makes you stronger, yes, but it is more fatiguing. Stretching is a lot less fatiguing and has also been shown to have some effect on reducing the effect of delayed onset muscle soreness. It's not a huge effect, and certainly it's not going to make the difference if your nutrition and your sleep routine isn't properly dialed in, but even so, it has been shown to have an effect. So there are pros and cons to both. Okay, what else do we know about stretching? Well, we know that it's a bad idea to engage in static stretching. Again, remember that's where you hold a stretch for 15 seconds up to a minute before you complete any sort of strength or power or speed training, because it reduces the ability of those muscles to contract with maximum force, which is obviously going to go against what you're going to try and do in the next session. But dynamic stretching, yes, this is a good idea and should or could form part of an effective warm-up before strength training. Now, this is one that I wanted to get onto. When shouldn't you stretch? Okay, so just because you feel stiff in an area doesn't necessarily mean that that area needs to be stretched. In fact, when you're actively feeling tight and stiff in an area and it's really noticeable, this is possibly the body creating something called protective tension. Okay, now that means that the body has deliberately made those muscles stiff in order to protect that part of the body for some reason. Okay, and that could be to limit range of motion because there could be a weakness elsewhere in the body that it's protecting against. So, read another strength coach just talking about protective tension recently, a guy called Eric Cressy, and he referred to it as picking the scab. If you feel protective tension in part of the body and you think, oh, I'll just stretch that out, that'll feel fantastic. This is akin to picking a scab off a wound. Yeah, it kind of feels great at the time, but actually you're just delaying the healing process and not addressing the problem. So, where do we often feel protective tension? Lower back, hamstrings, shoulders. Okay. Okay. Now, Eric Cressy is a fantastic person to read up on about shoulder injuries. He works with baseball pitchers and they put their shoulders through some pretty crazy ranges of motion at some pretty high forces. I'm not a shoulder expert compared to him, so I might link one of his articles below where you can read about that if you're interested in that stuff. Lower back. Now, getting off the bike, we've often all felt kind of a lower back tightness. I think that's something that a lot of people, if you've spent a long time on the bike, will experience. And yet when you think about it, your lower back is actually in a sort of lengthened position. You're somewhat rounded, maybe a little bit. You're certainly not in a shortened position. And so why would it need stretching if it's just spent hours in a somewhat lengthened position? This again could be an example of protective tension. Hamstrings. Again, it's very unlikely that your hamstrings are actually chronically shortened. What is more likely is that you are weak somewhere in your core and your hamstrings, again, are generating protective tension to reduce movement elsewhere in the body so that you don't injure yourself. So, you shouldn't always stretch. Just because it feels good doesn't make it right. So remember, sometimes this is akin to picking the scab, and strength training can also have really beneficial effects here. So yes, protective tension, that can be addressed with proper strength training, and also flexibility and mobility. Yes, there should be some stretching in a rider's routine, especially for the hip flexors, but strength training does seem to address a lot of the issues that stretching claims to address as well. So I'm not saying don't stretch, I'm just saying stretching isn't always the answer. I hope I've cleared that up for people. I'll link a couple of articles that you can read below if you want to learn more about this. And yeah, if you've got any questions, please fire away.